everyone. As promised, we're back to talk about what happened in the most recent Canadian federal election. It was a late night. I stayed up. I watched the results coming in, and there was one surprise after another for me, and some things that I thought would happen, and they happened. But overall, what we got was a minority Liberal government led by Mark Carney. The Conservatives picked up a lot of votes, but it wasn't enough for them to form government. But we do have a minority government, which means that it'll be easier for us to hold the government to account. It'll be easier for the opposition, the official opposition, to hold the government to account on everything that they're doing. And we were going to do that anyway, no matter what kind of government we got. And we did promise to come back and talk about this. So I'm really excited to talk with Jay today about what we're looking at now that we know the results of this election that has been going on, it feels like forever. So it's over now. Let's talk about it.
It's over. Let's talk about it. Of course, there's a lot of issues that we can talk about. There's the Trump elephant in the room that clearly played a very big role in the election, particularly with our older voting demographic in Canada. The exit polls, the pre-election polls were all showing that especially older Canadians were more concerned about Trump's tariff threats, some of the talk about annexation, 51st state. Obviously, that was a big factor in the election, Sabine. But moving forward, out of this election, how do we best deal with the Trump question, I think, is something we have to dissect here, because the Liberals really put it out there that, we got to stand strong. They kept talking elbows up, they had Mike Myers in their commercials.
You did?
Elbows up, we got to make sure we defend Canada. But they haven't really talked about it, to my knowledge, to my thinking. How do we really protect Canada? How do we really strengthen Canada? And how do we do that other than not just throwing up more tariffs and retaliatory tariffs, which we know drive up the cost for everything for consumers?
Well, we know that government likes to do the easiest things a lot of the times that's on the table, and the easiest thing would be to just push back with retaliatory tariffs, as I'm sure you know. So what I think is going to happen is the instinct is going to be, we have to look like we're acting very decisively against Donald Trump, so we're going to keep pushing back with tariffs, and that could be the worst decision they could make over the first little bit in office. The Canadian people showed them that they're having trouble paying their bills. People are living paycheck to paycheck. If we put more retaliatory tariffs on when we say that we're putting them on the United States, what's really happening is Canadians are paying those tariffs. Americans are not paying that. They're going to be downloaded to the consumer, and we are going to have a harder time of paying our bills, of buying our grocery essentials. So even though that's the first instinct that the government will likely have, they really need to hold back at this point from acting on that. What we can do is look at really great alternatives like interprovincial trade, like looking at outside trading partners, because we don't want to insulate ourselves. That's never a good thing for our economy. But because our natural trading partners aren't really the greatest of friends with us anymore, we have to look outside of that. But I know you've been talking a lot about interprovincial trade, so I'll hand it over to you to talk more about what should happen there.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on the affordability piece a little bit, and it really does relate to the tariff question, because you've got 50% of Canadian households saying they're $200 away from not being able to pay their bills. Mm-hmm. That's a stunning statistic, and that should concern every politician in the country. And, Mark Carney talked about the need for Canadians to have more money in their pockets. That's why he put forward an income tax cut proposal for the lowest bracket. But, to say we want to give or leave $800 more back in the pockets of families through a middle-class income tax cut, which he's proposed on the one hand, and then say we want to have all these retaliatory tariffs that drive up the prices of goods within Canada on the other, really doesn't make sense. So if Carney wants to make life more affordable for Canadians, as you mentioned, one of the things to do is breaking down those internal trade barriers. And Carney set a deadline before the election of Canada Day, so July 1st, to get rid of these interprovincial trade barriers. And what these are non-tariff barriers. They're essentially carve-outs to a domestic free trade agreement that we have in Canada. There's about 400 carve-outs, and so we don't really have free trade here. Free trade in Canada is about as real as, You look at a block of Swiss cheese and all the holes, those are the kind of holes that we have in our free trade agreement. And so we really have to get that straightened out. There have been 3 provinces actually that have tabled legislation on their own: Ontario, Prince Edward Island, and Nova Scotia, that unilaterally take down trade barriers so long as the province they're trading with also takes down those trade barriers. So we've got 3 provinces on board. We've got to see more. There have been some bilateral deals. So recently, New Brunswick signed a deal, I believe, with Newfoundland and Labrador. Obviously, it's nice to see between one province and the other, but the best approach is to bring down all barriers between all provinces. Carney set the deadline of July the 1st. It's costing our economy $200 billion a year, according to the CFIB. So this is real money, but it also makes products more expensive. It's in effect a 21% tariff on goods that are traded between provinces. So if we get those down, we can bring down prices. We can encourage more domestic trade. And again, that lessens the dependence on the United States, which is important. But it also makes sure that we don't have higher prices and higher costs for consumers, which is what retaliatory tariffs would do.
So given everything that Carney, that Prime Minister Carney has been talking about throughout the entire election, do you think that that's going to happen? He did set a deadline. Do you think he's going to meet it? Do you think he's serious about it? Do you think they have to be serious about it? Do you think people are going to give them a pass if they aren't?
I think they got to be serious about it. I mean, we have Ontario, which is the largest province in Canada. It's 38% of our GDP. They've tabled legislation that allows for reciprocal free trade. So what needs to happen is the other provinces need to get on board. And so, this is something that's been bipartisan. The Conservatives were talking about doing the same thing if they won the election. This is something that's time has certainly come. It should have been done a long time ago. We're leaving so much money on the table. So I think Carney has to be serious. And if he wants to be taken serious on the economy, and he keeps saying he's more serious than Justin Trudeau, he's going to be more laser focused on the economy than his predecessor was. This is like job number 1, to show that within the next essentially 2 months, which is what he has.
The momentum is there right now. If he doesn't take hold of it, because people are so angry about Trump, and it's so obvious that they're willing to get behind a plan like this right now. I think that if he loses that momentum, he keeps it too long, it's going to go by the wayside, and that would be a pretty huge disaster, because this is the best chance we've had in a really long time to make this happen. The provinces are motivated, and they're being pushed into a corner, I would say, to make this happen. So I really, really hope that it does happen. And another thing that we talked about before the election that I want to bring up again now that we know what the outcome is, pipelines. I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit, because you did elaborate on it before. What are your thoughts now?
So this is another case where Canada's energy, like we send over 95% of our oil to the United States. And this is because the only real pipelines we have to get oil to market from Alberta goes through the United States. We don't have pipelines that go to the Pacific, that go to the East Coast, that go to the North. And so what we need is more pipelines to get our oil to market. You've got markets in Asia, you've got markets in Europe that want our oil, that want our natural gas, that could help decrease global emissions around the world, but would also allow us to diversify our trade and strengthen our economy. So these are absolutely projects that need to get built. Carney's been wishy-washy on this. In parts of the country, he said, well, maybe we do need a new pipeline. In other parts, he says, maybe we don't. But we absolutely do. Because again, if we're sending all of our oil to the United States, that's just another way we're going to be very dependent as, the Canadian economy on the Americans. And that's not going to change from retaliatory tariffs. Just putting more tariffs on the United States, if we don't actually change the way our economy works and diversify our trade, that's not going to change anything. And the way to diversify our trade when it comes to energy is to make sure that we actually get those pipelines that we desperately need and put those in and get them built.
Yeah, I think international diversification is like a word that we're using a lot, or an idea we're talking about a lot, because it's so important right now. One thing that I'll just touch on really quickly, because we could probably do a whole video on this, is supply management. And that's a part of that conversation, because, the Carney's Liberals do not want to touch it. It's in their platform. They say it's off the table for any negotiation. When we're dealing with Donald Trump, it's going to be really hard to go to somebody like him and say, oh, we have one thing that we really can't give up, but everything else is on the table. So,
Well, and that's assuming everything else is on the table, which
exactly.
it isn't. But supply management is something that absolutely has to go. It is a relic of 40, 50 years ago. This is something that is increasing cost for consumers, whether it's dairy products, whether it's poultry, whether it's our eggs. This is increasing prices. It means that we really can't export our products abroad because our products are just not competitive in terms of pricing. And so again, this is something that the Trump administration has actually pointed out.
That's right.
Specifically as something that they're upset with Canada with. It's something they wanted to negotiate in the USMCA. Ultimately, Canada, the government at the time protected most of supply management, and they're looking to do it again. And this is something that the Trump administration has very specifically pointed out as an irritant with Canada. And so this is a twofold problem. It's causing grief with the Trump administration on the one hand, and it's increasing prices for Canadian consumers on the other. So it's a lose-lose situation, and that is why we need to tackle this. And the Liberals are wrong to say we are not going to go after this. And obviously the reason that they're doing that was something political. This is something that parties have always done to try to appeal to a select few ridings in Quebec, where there's some dairy farmers that happen to like this, and punish the vast majority of Canadians who like to buy, which is virtually everybody, dairy, poultry, or eggs. So this is driving up prices. It's causing problems with the Trump administration. It is a lose-lose proposition. It's something that needs to be put back on the table, really on the table for the first time. But someone needs to put it on the table, and it should be Mark Carney.
That's right. Families trying to buy milk for their kids are going to really appreciate that, I think. It's something that's been sort of protected for so long. It's really frustrating to keep seeing it in every platform, and this Liberal platform saying, like, that's it, this is the one thing. Having a carve-out in general is very difficult, and we've seen from the provinces that they're being much better about their carve-outs. They're saying, okay, we're not going to bring these carve-outs like we do every single time, which allows us to have these horrible interprovincial trade issues, but we're not seeing that same leadership federally when it comes to that particular carve out of supply.
No, they're talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk. They're saying, provinces, take down all your carve outs, take out all this. We need unilateral trade within Canada, but when it comes to trade with other countries, we're going to set up all these barriers and put up this really big roadblock with the Trump administration, which it has caused problems in the past and will continue to cause problems, and that's why we need to deal with this issue now.
So another idea or policy that we need to talk about is housing when we're talking about affordability, because our biggest concern at the Consumer Choice Center is advocating for the ability for consumers to buy things that they want, and right now they can't buy homes if they want to. Most Canadians can't just get up one day and say, you know what, I really want to be a homeowner, and then actually work towards that dream. It's pretty out of reach for a lot of people, especially young people, and you'll see from various polls right before the election that it was either the first or the second, mostly the second biggest issue for them. Trump didn't even make it to the first or the second. It was like the third for them. First being affordability, second being housing, and then third being Donald Trump. So young people are struggling, and they've been so many data showing us that they're living paycheck to paycheck the most out of the population, millennials and Gen Z. So for people that are living paycheck to paycheck, that are forced to rent, they really can't afford to put down a down payment to buy a home. It's completely out of reach. I have some issues with what's happening in the Liberal platform. If it actually comes to fruition, it's going to make things a lot harder for those people. I'd really like the Carney government, now that they are a minority, to hear from other parties, to talk to sort of more open advocates for more housing, to hear their side of the story, because building a Build Canada Homes department is not the answer. If you go to work and the least competent employee there just doesn't seem to get fired and keeps doing the same mistakes over and over again, he's not the first person you're going to go to ask him to lead a huge file for your company.
Let's just make you CEO,
Yeah, let's make you CEO and figure this out. Our company's falling apart. Okay, well, why is that okay? That sounds bizarre, but it's not bizarre when we talk about housing. We keep telling the government to solve the problem they keep causing, and they keep making these horrible decisions to not solve the problem and instead making it
Yeah.
worse. And now we're saying, you know what? Um, the government should get back into the business of building homes. I mean, that is just so bad.
That's the exact opposite of what should happen.
So I really hope that with a minority government, the Carney Liberals really rethink that course of action, because that's what they're hedging their bets on. This is the big thing they're doing. They want to find ways to make things more streamlined, dig up like books from the past that include all these building ways to build homes from
Prefabricated
like the
homes
70s.
from, a
Yes,
century ago, or
and
yeah,
if you ask a developer, he'll be like, just let me build. Like they'll be
yeah,
just say, just let me build. I know how to
zoning
do this.
laws, deregulate,
Yeah, zoning laws at the very
um,
least.
going after development fees at
Mhm.
the municipal level is a huge issue. It costs like hundreds of thousands of dollars to
Right.
build homes for developers in taxes.
Yep.
And I would say the one positive, somewhat, from the Liberal platform on housing was taking that sales tax
Yes.
off of new builds. They're restricting it to new builds that are worth up to $1 million and only for first-time home buyers. Those are restrictions that I think don't make sense. But the idea that we're trying to take the sales tax off of new homes to make new homes more attainable, so you can get folks either, if that's their first home and they're buying it, great, or what the Conservatives were saying was, even if it's their second home, get somebody out of their first home, and then that opens up that home for someone else.
Exactly.
So, it's good to see. Taking taxes off is the answer. Taking regulation off is the answer.
Mhm.
Getting out of the way of developers is the answer. Making the government the developer, definitely not the answer. But that seems to be where the Liberals are going. Hopefully, they're going to rethink that.
And since we're talking about the younger generations in this election, something that they're brought up with a lot, like that their generation gets brought up with a lot, is the topic of pouches and harm reduction in that way. So, what do you think the future holds for that now that the election's over?
So, yeah, in the dying days of the campaign, actually, there was movement. Now it's from the opposition, conservatives, not the government. It'll be interesting to see, because the health minister who introduced the latest regulations on pouches is gone. So we'll see if the government reverses course at all. I'm not sure. We'll have to see where Carney stands on this. But essentially what they've done is, for nicotine pouches, which obviously, they're meant to help smokers quit, to have an alternative. It's all about harm reduction.
They don't seem to be treated that way, though.
No, they're not treated that way. Essentially, the way it is in Canada right now, you can go to a gas station or a corner store and buy some chewing tobacco, or you can buy some cigarettes. But if you want to get these pouches, which are meant to help people quit, you actually have to go to a pharmacy and get a script and then fill that there. So you actually have to get the pouches from the pharmacy, from behind the counter. And at minimum, I think you either have to get a script, or you have to justify to the pharmacist that you are getting this, and swear on, cross your heart that you're getting this because you're a smoker who needs help quitting. It's absolutely ridiculous that you can get chewing tobacco and cigarettes anywhere. At the convenience stores, at gas stations. The Conservatives were saying, let's bring these back to convenience stores and gas stations because they're for harm reduction, which was, of course, the right approach. And we've been talking about this for a while. The Liberals were quiet on that issue in the dying days of the campaign. We haven't heard from them. But the health minister who made that change not all that long ago, he's gone now. He's retired. So, new health minister, we shall see. But that's absolutely a common sense thing that the government should do, a change that they should make in the next government.
Well, that's just a few of the issues that we've been following over this election. There are a bunch more, but we'll wrap up for now. You can rest assured that Jay and I and David and everyone at the CCC is always on top of these issues, making sure that we're talking about them, we're bringing them to light, and we're advocating for consumers. And we'll be back soon, Jay and I, to talk more about some other issues that we think are important now that the Canada's looking a bit different. Canada's finished with their federal election, and we move forward as a country to figure out what our next steps are. So we'll be back soon, and we will stay on top of this for you, as always.